Is this someone who is likely to improve himself? According to most commentators, Q was a district of the suburbs just outside of one of the gates, Khufu, Confucius' hometown. The bearing of messages was a fairly complex ritual task, normally borne by adults. Confucius' unnamed interlocutor?
I think it's interlocutor.
Yeah,
What does that mean?
Someone that you have a conversation
Yeah,
with.
communicate.
Okay. Say it again. Interlocutor?
Interlocutor.
Interlocutor.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's
Not a-
Interlocutor is impressed by this precocious boy and expects Confucius to share his admiration. The master replied, I observed him sitting in the presence of adults and also walking alongside his elders. He is not looking to improve himself, but is just after quick success.
As we read in 13:17, those who crave speed will never arrive. Brooks and Brooks describe this passage as another vignette of culture decline in the young. Not a desire to improve oneself by associating with his moral superiors, but an eagerness to get ahead by hanging around the powerful. In his desire for quick success, the young boy arrogantly flouts the dictates of ritual propriety, which require that boys stand while in the presence of adults, and the juniors walk behind their elders. Again, such a lack of deference to elders and ritual respect in a young person will lead to nothing but trouble. Both 1443 and 1444 document disturbing signs of ritual carelessness among the youth of Confucius' age.
I think it'd be helpful to understand some of the context of what this complex ritual task is to better understand what the boy was doing, or the young man. And possibly defining precocious. I think that's like that mature, like developing things that a child would not normally develop that quickly. the master's reply kind of gives you a lot of insight to both, even without understanding the complex nature of the ritual task. And that's obvious by the commentary after that. So he's sitting when he should be standing, so that's a lack of respect. And he is walking aside instead of behind, which is also a matter of deference. So that connects to ritual propriety and the honor and reverence and respect for elders and the place that they have in the midst of a community of people. And so when you see a young person not caring about the value, why those things have value, it's not about ritual performance, as we might just define ritual. Or maybe I should say legalistic, because I've written this text has its own understanding and definition of what ritual really means, and it's not like we define it in our religious culture. We define it negatively in our religious culture and way of thinking, but ritual here is better understood to be the proper way of doing things because there's a purpose behind it. So that's again connected even to the rectification of names. And so this extends further to the idea of lip service, but no heart and motive connected to it. So you know what to say, and you know what to do, but you really don't understand why, and mostly because that why is overborne by a motive that's impure. I'm reminded of a scenario that I've shared with you guys on a couple occasions, but I experienced it a lot throughout school. And, that would be the student that either asks a question most of the time, but often answers a question in order to make themselves known for what they know. And that is to make yourself an equal to your instructor. And you're doing that in front of others. This is very similar. So that's the stance that he's taking and sitting, not showing honor, and walking beside it's showing everybody that you believe yourself to have achieved something. So you're an equal to these people. And therefore, by relating to them as equals, you are giving yourself a higher position than what you really have in your own mind, and ideally in your mind also, whether you think the thoughts or not, also among others. And so, I had a professor in college who was a lot like Confucius in this way, where he saw right through that stuff. And I remember one day this very precocious young man, he's a smart guy. He was asking questions, and about the third or fourth question in, the professor noticed and asked him, because he was wearing this yellow polo or yellow button-up shirt. And so he asked the question again, and the professor said, "Is that a yellow shirt you're wearing?" And it just stopped him in his tracks. Yeah. And he went on to ask his question. Didn't pay any attention to it. About 2 or 3 minutes later, another question. "Professor, is that a yellow shirt you're wearing?" Third time, no more questions. You're not really who you think you are. Interestingly, that young man and 3 or 4 other young men that were in this Bible school that I went to ended up bringing doctrinal accusation against several professors, trying to undermine their position and placement in that school. That's the kind of motivation and heart that's behind this way of thinking. And so when Confucius answers this question, is this someone likely to improve himself? Well, let me ask you this. Can anyone improve who thinks they've already arrived? No. You're done learning. Now, that's a really cautionary tale in relationship to believers, because so many today claim the word of the Lord. And they use that as a means of, honestly, equality with God. I stand next to God. And use it as a means of coming over or ahead of others. So it sounds right, but everything it does is wrong. Because it diametrically opposes the pattern of life and teaching of God's own Son, Jesus, whose entire life was representative of and speaking toward a life of submission and humility. And that was the message of the apostles as well. It's very easy once we find a way to establish, control in a conversation or situation to forget some of the fundamental lessons of relational ethic and intelligence. So then he who is thought to be wise in his own eyes, judging by what he hears, what he sees, is actually a fool. In reality. And Confucius sees through that. So others may say, oh wow, what a brilliant young man. Look how, ambitious he is, and he's really trying to do things right. Well, he observes not just the words that he speaks. He observes the way he relates to others. And says, well, his way of life, his way of relating to others, tells a very different story. And it's not a very cute, what a fine young man type of story.
I do find it funny, just related to the recommendation that do not judge someone on their words, but on the fruits of their life. And I mean, he's literally delivering a message, words. Yeah. But when Confucius looks at his actions, he doesn't see any of the respect for ritual there. It's hollow.
And so many things like that are very easily discerned. You may speak a message of humility, but when you throw a fit over not being recognized, not getting your way, your actions tell a very different story than your lips. Or your ideas. It's a beautiful idea, beautiful concept. Beautiful writing, poem, speech. What about the way you live? That's the fruit of life.
I worked with this guy at Dell, a guy named John Beagle, and we were talking about how you manage your career one day, and he told me something that stuck with me. John was a talker, had a way with words, and he would often position himself in situations where he'd be hanging out with people more senior than him in the organization, like the executives and bosses, right? Because he knew, if they like me, then good things are going to happen in my career. And the line he told me is, perception equals reality, right? And that's the way he managed his career. With whatever those executives perceived him to be, that was their reality, right? which is just blatant manipulation, right? But in that situation, right, it gives no regard to truth, right? What is actually true in John's life in terms of how he does his work, how he gets things done, right? And eventually that living by perception equals reality caught up to him, and he got promoted well above what he should have been, and he ended up getting fired because he didn't have what was internal to him to actually get that type of job done. And so, in this situation, I'm looking, we have a very different view of sons, and that God sees the truth within us, right? God sees what we're doing in the quiet place, and ultimately that is what matters more than how am I around the elders and what do they perceive me to be, right? All that's not the truth. The truth is what is happening every single day in the way that you're growing and trying to be obedient in your heart and things of that nature.
Mm.
The ritual of bearing a message. In practice, it looks something like this. The composure of the messenger. The messenger doesn't rush in or speak casually. He carries himself with dignity, controlled posture, measured movement. The message reflects the sender, so sloppiness would dishonor them. Formal presentation. He approaches, often bows, and waits to be acknowledged. No blurting out things. Timing matters. Exact transmission. The message is delivered word for word without embellishment, interpretation, or commentary. Accuracy is a moral duty. No personal intrusion. The messenger doesn't insert opinions or emotions. He is a vessel, not a participant. Proper closure. After delivering a message, he withdraws respectfully. Again, controlled and deliberate.
I'd like to imagine this boy probably followed all of those standards probably pretty well, which is why the person inquiring to Confucius asked, what do you think of this person? Is he someone likely to improve himself, which is implying that, do you see potential in a young man like this in becoming the ideal gentleman? But what Confucius, maybe in part just because he has been able to see or observe this boy in other scenarios, but obviously more so because of his ability to examine others according to the standards he himself holds in his own life unto himself and his own disciples, is able to discern something that, as a result of his inconsistency, that being on the boy's part, with adherence to ritual, he's able to notice the real motivation of the boy's heart. This is reminding me a little bit of that distinction we made a little bit ago on the difference between Yi and Li. You guys recall that when we were going through the introduction together. I think the first has to do with rightness, is how that's translated. And then Li is profit, or it is a mindset that has to do with a desire to gain somehow. So that these are, what this is pointing out is two different heart motivations. And that measure, or yardstick, if you will, of discernment that is applied to an individual's heart is ritual. And of course, you're not able to understand someone else's conception of ritual unless it is firmly established within you first. Which is why Confucius has a bit of, obviously a bit more insight over this young man's life than the person inquiring to Confucius about the young man. Because Confucius is firmly established in his understanding and practice of ritual. And just to recap for the sake of others here, this is ritual, and this was already mentioned earlier, but ritual is not just what's written in the Book of Rights. Obviously, it's not as much a memorization of rules as it is understanding a way in which a person carries him or herself. It's a matter of comportment, and obviously that has to do with the way one carries oneself with other people. So that was something my dad pointed out earlier, was Confucius had keener insight as to how the boy related to other people. And it was through that small window that Confucius was able to perceive what actually motivates this young man. And it is not rightness or yi, which I think would be worth getting into a little bit here to understand what that actually means. But it was what Confucius would term li, or the desire for gain, for profit, for quick success. And ritual being seen as a means to gain something is obviously missing the point of ritual altogether. In fact, misses the essence of ritual entirely. And that something like that should, and obviously should be and was as clear as day to Confucius. There was nothing hidden to him there. So Confucius was obviously able to point out specific things, but I'm sure someone like Confucius would have a pretty intuitive feeling about a person right away. So even if you had a boy who followed to the T everything that Matt just described as far as what a good messenger would be, someone like Confucius was probably thrown off instantly. And obviously not just because of how he performed the duty of delivering the message, but because of other scenarios Confucius observed that boy in. And so I think it's always helpful to extend this into the way we read other people, and maybe before even considering that, the way that we reach a place of perception, if you will, as Matt touched on, within our own inner life, so that then we can come to a place of being able to read others. How does that extend from an example like this? And Confucius himself, I would say, being very precocious in his ability to judge in the right sense, to rightly judge the character of others. How do we arrive at that place ourselves? That's my question for you guys.
You're asking how we arrive to that place of kind of like insight or judgment? Or
Regarding other people.
the genuineness of...
Yeah, notice how this even played out. Confucius was first asked about the boy before he even offered any kind of opinion about him or insight about him. This is not. There was almost a somewhat withdrawn manner, it would seem, in which Confucius offered any or said anything about this boy. He was asked first. It wasn't something he brought up in his own initiative.
Well, I think it would probably be with one's own relationship to goodness and to that source, I guess, that you would be able to tell the true character of someone else, and if it does come from that same source. Right? They understand it as something a little different, but we understand it as a relationship with their Father, right? That as something that's living, so we can understand a little bit more of that genuineness if we have a relationship ourselves with it, right? We can tell the difference between someone who just says those things and who is of the same spirit, I guess.
So then, what would your motivation be if it's not Li, as we're understanding Li, which is seeing something like ritual, anything involved with ritual, as a means to an end? Then what would Yi be? What would rightness be? It's obviously not Li. Maybe you have some noble or virtuous goal in mind, but ritual's still a means to that end. Like, you could take it pretty far in saying that you want to be recognized, say, as a gentleman. That would seem to be a pretty noble and virtuous end to have in mind. But ritual is still that means unto that end for you. I would say that this probably applied to most of, if not all of Confucius' own disciples. But would that, even something like that, would that be rightness? Would that be true rightness? Or is that still following that same pattern as seeing something as a means to an end? So that's, I guess, maybe we can switch the question up a little bit. What is Yi? If it's not its opposite, which is the pursuing profit or gain of some kind. It's kind of a tough one because, like, why would you make an effort in something if it's not to gain something?
I think that it narrows what you think you're gaining. You know, whereas the rightful practice of ritual is, in essence, to gain. It's a means to gain something you don't know yet, because it's a part of a developmental process. So it's not used as a means to achieve some specific goal. That's to be very, very narrow-minded about the use or the practice of ritual. So goodness has a lot of undefined boundaries, because it's based on the situation, it's based on the relationship, it's based on the context of how it's applied. And so the rightful practice of ritual enables you to manifest goodness in the unknown scenario, in the unknown future, because it's developed you. So it's a very different, it's not a tool for your manipulation. It's a means by which you are fashioned and then have a greater enablement for goodness.
Right, this is kind of a switching of modes too, because like you become less and less driven by ethical calculation.
Mm-hmm.
So it switches from within the context of rightness, it's like it switches from it's right because to because it's right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you don't have to explain your actions or you don't have to be able to explain to yourself your actions before you go into it. You develop a heart intuition going forward into everything that you do because it becomes real to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a mental equation for you where you have all of the variables and then you're able to insert them and see it this this answer pop out of your virtue calculator, and then you go forward into something. That shouldn't be what precedes virtuous action. That's something that can, in many cases, should come later. You should be able to explain sincerely and instructively why something took place, as Confucius does throughout this text altogether. He's able to explain, say why he did or didn't do something, or even why other people, whether they have lived a long time ago or did something moments ago, did or didn't do something. But when it comes into an in the moment way of responding to something that requires your judgment, your discernment, then it is only truly sincere, I would say, arriving at virtue or arriving at goodness and done virtuously when that you've entered into the right mode of thinking, which is what we're addressing here as yi, as opposed to li, which I guess we could append to that way of thinking of it's right because so and so. So seeing something as a means. Honestly, I would say this is a completion of maybe not a completion, but an example of how the law is actually written on the heart, is when we don't have that middleman part of the process where it has to pass through this again, the word that I keep using is a calculation. But I know I'm conjoining a lot of terms here, but when you are really acting in rightness, then it becomes a thing that is it's natural to you. So it's wu wei. It's an effortless sort of action. You can, I believe, truly enter a flow state of virtuous behavior. But obviously we don't magically arrive at that place. It's something that does, it takes a lot of, it takes practice just like everything else. It takes a lot of trial and error.
I think we talked a lot about motivation. The end is goodness, right? It's not the results or the what will come with goodness in your life that motivates you. It actually is the cultivation of the goodness within you. That's the end, right? Ever growing in that. Does that make sense?
Yes. And that, again, that is what leads to the switching of modes, or the maybe a better but more often used phrase would be a change of your heart, is what you're really going after. And that's kind of the beautiful thing that about the reality of it is, I think when you're going after the right thing, it's not actually something that is as tangible to you as the things which are the lesser things would be, which would be the things that you would see as something to gain or a matter of profit for you, using the Li idea again. There is something, as again we've seen many times about goodness, that is very lofty and even somewhat vague and inaccessible, but in such a way that I guess requires a kind of faith on the individual's part to pursue in the first place. And it's the practice of something like faith that allows for the mode switch from things that don't need explanation and really can't be explained, still being what motivates you. I really wish I could remember that very famous line of poetry by, I can't even remember the name of the poet, but I just remember the very last line of this excerpt I'm thinking of, where he says, "Then what's a heaven for?" Does that ring a bell for anyone? Maybe you could chat GPT it, but it's like, it's something about the distance and loftiness of heaven being something that we're always reaching for but can't quite reach, but that leads us to excellence because of that very fact, because it's just being just out of reach, kind of. I really wish I could remember the line. It's pretty long, but I'm getting the same sentiment from this.
Based on that last line, I expected it to have a different message. Did you say, then what's heaven for?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think of that at least in terms of how modern religion often exercises itself. Doing goodness for the sake of goodness is a very foreign concept in Christianity, I think. I think it's always goodness for the sake of X, for the sake of heaven. I think if goodness is the end, if you're doing goodness for the sake of goodness, then...
Robert Browning.
Was that the name of it?
Do you have the excerpt?
What a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what is heaven for?
Yes, that's what it is. That's it.
Sorry, Jaden.
Oh, no,
I totally interrupted
No,
you.
it's okay.
My apologies.
No, I was just going based on
Well,
what
please
you
keep
said.
going. I wanted to hear what else you said, and my brain got in the way. So my apologies.
No, it's just the line always made me think that's I think my settlement, even with I used to try to understand what heaven was like, and now I just don't really care. I think the idea of it is nice, but I think really if you're pursuing goodness for what it is, then you don't need a heaven as motivation. And that's just what the line made me think of.
That's an interesting thing about that statement. There's a man's reach should exceed his grasp. He's going beyond his capability. And, or what is heaven for, that's the other side, is that, God is actually always has longed for this. This is the real, like, what a seeker really is. And I know that we, in churchianity stuff, have this seeker thing, which is in the modern day means make it easy for everyone. But that's not what a true seeker is. A true seeker is one who is reaching beyond their grasp. And when God sees that, then he reaches and pulls you to himself. So there's a sentiment in Scripture, or not a sentiment, but an actual word from the Lord where he says, draw near to me, and I will draw near to you. So he's responsive to that. And he's looking for that type of response from those who want to draw near to him. So, again, contemporary Christianity, modern day thinking around that is that, God's the big Santa Claus in the sky, or the big, giant, unseen benefactor who just does all these good things. So everything that's good is God, and everything that's bad is not. And, that's kind of a bunch of ridiculousness. In reality, God is hidden in many ways. And not because he doesn't want to be found, but because he wants to be sought. And that's a huge differentiation. And so when the nature of God is something that is altogether different from the fallen or unregenerated nature of man. So he must be able to reach for something that is beyond his capability in order to become something that is beyond his current capacity. And only God can enable that. That's the other side of, I remember when Corbin and I were talking, and he was like, I can't go anymore. I can't go any further, Well, that's the place that God wants us to go to that precipice, to that point, and then reach forward so that he can draw. And, his grace is sufficient to complete that desire. And it actually meets his desire.
I don't remember the name of the artist, but I'm sure many are very familiar with I think it's Adam and God, and it's like the two figures. What I love about that painting is that
Michelangelo.
yes, and God's fingers pointed straight out, but you'll look, Adam's finger is actually slightly bent. And I think a lot of that analogy there is that there's still a hesitation on man's part to reach out fully to God.
And a weakness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think the coolest thing about that photo is that even if Adam were to extend his finger, they still wouldn't be touching fingertips. But that's not, it's exactly what you're saying. What God is not wanting is for you to be able to reach him on your own merits. He just wants you to see you extend out. He just wants to see the sincere attempt on your behalf, and he closes the distance. And I think that painting just captures that in such a subtle way. That's always been very touching to me.
I know the terminology here is something that throws people off a little bit sometimes, but I'm reminded of a theme throughout the Tao Te Ching, actually, of this, because there's a lot of like there are many like dichotomies presented in the Tao Te Ching, so weakness and strength, and throughout there's actually like male and female as like these cosmic principles, so that's something that is symbolized by yin and yang, that sort of thing. But there's one line that says, or has been translated to say, no, it says no to the male, but adhere to the female, or just these two different kinds of principles. And what that is communicating is what that first male or yang principle represents, which is strength, striving, initiation, those sorts of things, versus the yin or female principle, which symbolizes yielding and humility and acquiescence, those sorts of things. It's a kind of guideline I'm seeing for a way to approach not just difficulty in life, but the kind of posture to present oneself to life, generally speaking, which I think is what is being encouraged there. It's not it's again, whenever we look at or talk about the Tao Te Ching, it's the main thrust of the work is don't strive, but learn to yield, and then you will be able to find the way of effortless action, or live in and thrive in Wu Wei. But I'm not seeing this as any different from the encouragement to learn to humble yourself, or bring yourself, or allow yourself to be brought to the lowest place, because the only place to be brought following that is higher, or to be exalted. So it's never obviously our pursuit or our motive to reach a place of exaltation. But it's not something to be ignorant of either, which is kind of where I'm seeing this this guideline to know the exaltation, to know the higher place, of the higher purpose, of the glory of something. But when it comes to one's own motive or the direction of one's own heart, it is always to be in a place of yielding to it's a place of submission. It's not a place of weakness per se, in the face of say worldly influences that come against or try to undermine those things. But it is, if that was the case, then you don't actually know the male. You don't know. I'm jumping a little bit, but the way that this balances here, instead of simply saying adhere to the yin principle, adhere to weakness. It's here to submission. If that was all that it said, then you do get the kind of person where they're just kind of tossed around by life, and every influence that comes against or for them is something that they have no control or power of or over. But with it being balanced by knowing the yang, or knowing what is truly in the place of power and authority, I think this is the same thing as saying that we have the fear of the Lord. And to have that fear is to not fear anything else. This is kind of an incomplete thought in my head, so maybe I should have spent some more time deliberating over it, but the balance between these is, I guess, where we start as those who make our own decisions in the process. So the decision on our part is always a yielding and submission to what we know is in the place of authority and power in our lives. And with this is the pattern of decision making that we follow in every situation, then it will only ever lead to a lifting up. That's always the fruit of and the pattern of humility. So sorry that most of that didn't make sense, but the inverse of that is just as inevitable, and it's also expressed many times in the scriptures, where if you're, and this is again kind of what I'm saying, is this ongoing difference between yi and li, where if you're beginning at the place of striving for something or seeking to attain something, no matter how good and lofty and noble it seems, then if that's your starting point, then the end point is always the fall. It's always being brought to a lower place, because that's just the shape of it's the path.
It's almost the fruit.
Yeah, of reality. It's just how it works. It is an unavoidable universal principle, I guess.
It's kind of that upside down economy thing, right? Just in terms of the world tells you, you need to reach, you need to grasp, you need to, versus, humble yourself and the Lord will lift you up.
Yes, that was that scripture, and then also from Proverbs, speaking of the pride before the fall
Yeah.
principle was in my mind. it just makes me laugh how we can have a very helpful and insightful thought on our hearts, but our inability to express the things that we would want to just makes it all together awkward. I know we all experience that.
That's the whole point of communication.
And I think of that sometimes when I see another or hear another person like expressing something. I can tell there's something really in them that they want to bring forward. But even me realizing that and listening to them, I don't fully grasp what they're saying, at least what they want to be communicating or what they want to communicate. So, I mean, I guess that's a large part of what we do in all of these classes together is practice.
Yeah, it helps.
I feel like I'm doing it wrong. I still can't really do it that well. Well, yeah, anyways.
I think it's that, I was just looking up the line, so I remembered it, but the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao,
That's from the first.
right? I mean, these are things that you can't really express fully with words.
You can live on.
Exactly, but if you could express them, then you're not actually expressing.
Well, I don't even think I was trying to express anything all that deep. I know I can express, this is not about me and my ability to express, this is something that applies to all of us, but I at least have found that when I write more often, I'm able to express myself verbally much better. But I have not been writing that much like you guys, so that's why y'all should be talking more than me, because you have been writing.
There's a lot that we talked about that correlated with a poem I just finished this morning, so maybe I'll get an opportunity
nice.
to share it in Tim's class. It's for the storage room.
Corbin, would you mind praying for us to close?
I do it.
You have to. You have to.
Lord, I thank you for these times of reflection, and I hope for all of us to reach understanding in whatever time it be appropriate to do so. Amen.
Good.